Hi everyone, welcome back. So another way that we can bead up earrings is to literally tie them on row by row, and I'll show you a quick example of that, such as these. These are tied on in individual rows with individual lines of wire. And a little trick that I do is that I get two pieces of tape, if you need to, and you put the sticky sides up. Just kind of put them together. I'm doing two because my earrings are a little bit wide. And then I use the sticky space to help me hold on to my beads while I'm laying them out. That's my little trick. And the hardest part of these earrings literally is laying out the beads. So if I wanted to do a little line of garnets through here, I would have to break out my jar of beads and figure out the layout of my beads. And then you have beads like this that are more not so rounded, but that actually sit up on their sides. So you have to do the placement in such a way. I can fit two into that space. So I'll stay with my other earring here and make sure that there's two over here. So down here I think I'm going to go for garnets then. I've got a space for two of them. I'll have to adjust this wire just slightly. And then maybe I'll just keep going with garnets. Maybe I can get three. I'm going to make that one fit three right there. And then as I approach the narrow section again, I might switch back to the other little beads to make them fit into that narrower space. Then I'll go for one, and two, and then maybe I can get one into that little tiny space right there. Okay, so I go through and I do this. It takes forever, but when you have a bead layout that you like, then you can start with wires, and I leave one kind of modeled and then I tie the other one together, and then vice versa. So now that I have a model of how I want my beads to go, come over here and very delicately remove these and then just start getting the wires ready. Okay, so I'm going to use 28 gauge wires to tie these beads onto this frame. So I've cut several little pieces of 28 gauge. They're all 5 inches long. 5 or 6 inches, so that you have plenty to tie on with and then add some length with. So I'm just going to peel back my tape. I've got this one spot right here now, and I know that I need one of these little guys. So I'll center them on my wire, and I'll come down here to my frame, and I will do 5 or 6 wraps to get me to the next line. And I'll leave the ends on the wire so that I can fill in gaps once all the beads are actually on here and placed. So I'm going to make a couple of wraps here with my right hand side wire to get it anchored and in position. And then I'll use the other side of my wire. Just get up here into position. And that's good. It's falling between the frame, the 2 main frame wires. So I'll make 2 wraps to get this one anchored. You want your wraps side by side. Let me change this camera for us. You want your wraps side by side so that you don't have any bubbles, and you want even tension. See, I've got a crossed wire right there. I like to make 5. Gets me to about the head of the bead. Whether it's 5 or 6, I like to get just to the head of the bead because the next bead lives right on top of that one. So keep the sides even. This is 4. I'm going to go ahead and do 5 on this one. And you notice that I am wrapping from the bottom of the frame up. So all of these wraps will be going up the frame. So this one has 3. Make 4. And 5. Oop. Get them nice and neat and get the bead landed where you want it, and then just leave those ends on there. So for the next one, then we have 2 of these copper barrels. I think these are hematite in copper color. Little, I think they're called rondelle, actually, not barrels. And I'll just get them centered on my wire, and then I'll center them on my frame just above the previous bead. And remember that we're wrapping up the frame, so it'll be easier if you're not trying to balance underneath the camera here. I'll get a couple of wraps on this side. Then I'll come to this other side. Make sure that the beads are living nice, that there's no slack. And then I'll give a couple of wraps on this side. Once the beads are on there, I'll go ahead and make a few more wraps to get to the top of these beads so that the wire, is level with the top of the beads. and then I'll push it all back. So you see, I leave the wires because you might have to fill up some gaps. You don't have to. You can leave them, with gaps. But if you don't want gaps and you want a solid coil, then you leave these little ties on so that once all the beads are on, you can go back and, do a wrap or two as you need to fill in those spaces. This is a curvy space, so it's not, and I built this frame, so it's not 100%, symmetrical and the same as the other one. So, and especially since we're going on a curve, we're going to have one side that might, have more gaps than the other. So anyway, that's my little trick. I leave these on and I fill in the gaps later because I like a solid coil. So now on my next one, it looks like I'm trying to do 1 or 2 garnets, and it looks like my space is actually giving me 2. Ooh, see, the hardest part is getting the beads onto the wire. So there's 2. And I'll come down to my earring and I'll hold them there. It's better to be a little bit smaller than bigger. If these beads bleed over the frame, it's not as preferable as they fit inside the frame, even if there's a tiny bit of gap, because also what we can do with this extra wire is go through and wrap around the wire that feeds through the bead to eliminate those side gaps. And I don't know if I'll have to show you on this one or not, but it's the same as what we did with those garnet marquees. So I'll hold these beads in place. I'll make a couple of wraps to anchor this side. Turn it over, make sure there's no slack in the wire. Hold the beads and then wrap a couple of times around your frame. And then I'm going to go ahead and make 5 wraps to get myself level with the top of these garnets, 5 or 6. Push the coils back onto themselves and make sure that, the beads look nice, that they're not buckling. That looks good. And just keep working your way up this frame. This time I'm going for 3 of them because I'm approaching the widest space of my frame. 3 fits nicely there. And I'm just going to hold the beads, make sure I'm center on my wire, and wrap. Now if I had to make a little room like this last row, if it buckled too much, then certainly I can just take my plier and very gently adjust the frame so that those beads sit in between those wires. That's the beauty of making our own frames, is that we can shift them slightly for, you know, the slightly irregular beads. You see, they're not all completely the same size on my natural garnets here. So anyway, keep working on yours and line your beads up, and then do the opposite earring. Once I get this one finished, I'll release all these beads from the tape, and then I'll just follow this pattern on this second earring. So I'll see you when we get to the top of this. As it gets tight, sometimes we have to go pass to the back and then pass to the front. It gets hard to just skirt it through there. And then the other advantage to having these out here to the sides, obviously, is if I wanted to continue with any beads, I could just string them and then tie off to the outside of the frame, right? So that's handy. The other reason why I do it like this sometimes the beads will slide off if you don't have them under your thumb like that. If that happens, just put it back. And once you get that nice first tie, make sure there's no slack in the wire, and they should stay. And remember that if you have to nudge the frame, you can do that as well. And I don't have to go all the way to the top. I don't have to completely fill this space. It's to your liking what you do with your earrings. Just work patiently so that you don't bend up your frame. And work patiently to get through the spaces that are a little bit tight. Work patiently with your beads to fit them. I like to just kind of trail these down as I work, keep them out of my way, but also to keep the beads level. You want to make sure that there's not a whole lot of buckling, or as little buckling as you can get. And now I'm going to go back to 2 garnets because the space is narrowing. And you see there's a lot of gap between those 2 beads and the earring frame. So I'm going to get inside of the earring, and I'm going to nudge the outside wire in slightly. Just work patiently so you don't wreck your earring, and that's close enough. I could get a little bit more. And again, it'd be easier if you're not in the camera. You're working with the most gentle squeezes so that you don't take your earring out of shape. Just enough to get the space a little closer, and then we can do some additional wraps if we need to fill in that gap. So those two fit pretty well, and I'll just go ahead and continue with my wraps. It's always easier if you get this little hook at the end of your wire. Let's work it like a needle a little bit. Work it a little bit like a needle or sewing. Make sure my slack is out. Ooh, ooh. That's the other reason why you have them on the tape. So if you bump the table, then at least you don't have to chase your beads on the floor. These beads are protruding a little bit, you see, because the frame is not big enough quite right there. So I'm just going to be very gentle and nudge the frame slightly so the beads fall in. That's pretty good there. Now I'll go to a single bead. And I'll slip it through the frame wires. I try to stay on a single frame wire, so I try to squeeze in between those on the side there. Whoop. Get the wire fed through and centered, and then finish the tie. And certainly these earrings could go in either direction, right? So you just need to pick. I think for the sake of my eyes, I might just stop it right there and not take it up into that little space. But if I did, actually maybe I will with just one. I have these wires up here, and since it's my very last bead, I think what I'm going to do is, rather than adding another wire, I'm just going to use this existing wire and pass kind of cat whiskers through my bead because I only need one. And see, it's sitting on the back side of the frame, but up there in that tight space, it's not that noticeable. So I'll tie this one on, and then I'm going to call it done for this earring and do my second one. And yes, you can do these cat whiskers all the way up the frame, moving from bead to bead. You just, need to make sure that each line has, each bead has its own row. And you can do this, cat whisker thing all the way up as well with fewer wires. You just have to make sure that your bead can take 2 wires through each side. That's pretty tight there, so I might just end that one. And then you can end them, hold on to everything, make very wide circles here until it snaps, just with a little bit of tension. You can make sure to tap those 2 ends if you need to, and then work your way down the earring. Make sure these rows are together, that the beads are not buckling. And then if you want to, you can eliminate all the wires and leave the gaps, or you can use these extensions and wrap up those gaps. I like to wrap up the gaps because it steadies up the row of beads, and so in time they don't shift as much. But this is all to your liking, so you can wrap your earrings as you choose, and certainly you can mix and match all the beads. I did a row of garnets just because January is a garnet month and I like the solid bead, but as you can see with this other example, I did a little blue lapis, and then I have some red corals. I think these are probably fake corals, and then I have some little yellow ones, and that's very festive. So these can be just about anything you want. You're working just to make sure your coils are side by side and not on top of each other. And I don't count to make sure the coils are the same on each side. I just fill up the gaps and I try to make them look as nice as I can. and as consistent as I can. You can slide them around as well with your fingers real carefully. And when you're happy, you can get rid of the wire. Just give a little pressure right there and do circles until it snaps off, and etc. So you can work through yours. And that might be all I do on that one. It's pretty tight. It does add a lot of extra time to fill in these gaps. And they don't have to be perfect. You know, it's kind of bohemian style. So it's a little more organic and fun and festive. And certainly you can do these in silver. You can do these in any metal. I'm just going to adjust this upper wire because we can do that as well. We are wire workers. Make it a little more neat. Make it cover a little bit there where I didn't get the coils, which is not a big deal. I think I can get rid of this one too. And then here is where my widest gap in the beads that I have are from my frame. I could try to pinch the frame in a little bit, but then I'm afraid I'm going to buckle the top. So rather, on this one, if it doesn't bother you, you can just leave it. But if it bothers you, then you can wrap the side wires, the threaded wires, to eliminate the space. And I'll show you how we do that here in a second when I fill up this gap and get up there. I'm using the wire below it because I'm wrapping upward. That's the way we've been wrapping all day with these earrings. Once I get close to that, you know, these two beads here with that wide gap, try to keep your tie wire from kinking. When you get close, you can wrap the threaded wire to eliminate some of the gap. You just have to do it carefully. Make sure that there's no additional slack. I could have also found one odd bead to fit in that row between these two. And I could have made it 3 beads, but just with one odd one there. You don't want to break your wire while you're doing this, so just go back and forth carefully and make a couple of wraps on that side of the bead. And then I'll come over here with this wire. See, I'm pulling outwards to tighten it. I just made a couple of corkscrews right around that wire, the part of the wire that wraps through, that goes through the bead. So on this one I'll do the same, and I'll make a couple of 360s right around there. You have to hold it, make sure you don't break the wire while you're getting it tight. And it doesn't have to be killer tight. It just has to be neat, and so that it eliminates the space there for you. That's pretty good. So you can barely notice that, but you see how I cinched up the gap between those 2 loose garnets right there. Okay, that's how I handle that anyway. Go make one more wrap right here. And again, you don't have to do any of this. You could have just cut all these lines off once you got the beads tied on and left the gaps. Okay. And I like to pass them to the back just to keep everything consistent. And break it off back here. And once I get down here and I go into wider spaces of the earring, you can be real creative here. You can go with more beads and use these extended lengths to add more beads of a different color onto the sides there if you wanted to too. I'm not going to, because I think you get the idea here, but you could, right? That's kind of fun. So here is another row that's a little bit off from the frame. You see these two, I have some gap. So I've coiled up the sides, and now I'm going to just take the wire and eliminate the gap or the space a little bit by wrapping around the wrap wire, the threaded wire. Again, you have to be careful because you can break that wire that's going in between your beads, that's going through your beads. So be sure to hold everything and don't get yourself caught up in the wire below it like I just did. So now I have to undo. Because I grabbed the wrong wire. Okay. just working with a real gentle hand. I'm just going to do a couple here, 2 wraps, and then I'll do 2 from the other side. So there's those 2. And you don't always have to break the wire off either. If you can't do that, certainly you can come in here and cut the wire off. Just make sure that you're not cutting anything that you don't want to cut. So small spaces. So come over here now on the opposite side, find the wire that I need, coil up a few on the frame to eliminate this gap I don't want. And again, you don't have to do this. Now I'll use this wire and go a couple of times around the wire that goes through the beads. To eliminate some of the gap, the space between the frame wire and the bead, to eliminate that jiggle. And this is a lot easier when you're closer to your body with these beads and your frame, and you're not trying to be underneath the camera here. And then continue. Alright, so once you have one earring finished in that layout, then you go ahead and basically start the other one in the very same way. Make sure that your earrings face the right direction, and then you can just follow the line up. 1, 2, 2 garnets, 3, 3, 3, 3, and so on. Okay? So I'll see you in a few minutes with this one done. So now I go to 3 garnets. And certainly you could attach the wire on the one side first if you have difficulty holding the beads. That is just my habit. So I could put 2 or 3 wraps here, and then slide my beads on. And get them lined up. Now it's tight here with these 3. So again, I'm going to adjust the frame slightly And I'm just going to take my plier, kind of motion it out a little bit right there. Probably shouldn't have done that so abruptly. You don't want to change the shape of your earring, you just want to make some slight adjustments so that the bead sits in there. The beads fall into the frame nicely, and that's pretty good. And then I'll take this side while it's still open, and I will drop my beads on. And then proceed from there. Get this first one real tight. Alright, so I beaded everything up on both earrings. And now what I'm doing is taking 28 gauge. I got 2 fresh feet of 28 gauge, and I anchored it down here, and I'm just starting to do some additional coiling. I coiled, these 2 wires together down here, and now I'm just going to coil up this upper center wire as well. You could, if you're doing this, use this wire and attach some additional beads here on your way up if you want to, like maybe some copper beads or a different color of round beads, whatever you want to do. All right, boy, that yellow really took away from the color. I found these tiny little pink crystals, and I think that they're super cute, so I'm going to just go back and forth and tie some in. Got tiny beads like this, you kind of have to hold on to them because they slip away down the wire. But when you get them lined up, you can additionally tie them in through the opposite coil. Just work it over there. Make sure it's a nice connection with no slack wire. And then I'm just going to come back on this side. I'm going to make 3 or 4 coils to get to line me up with the head of the bead here. maybe a couple more stitches. Once I think I've got enough room to line up the other row of beads, I think one more, maybe two more. And now I'll pick up a couple more beads. These are very small. 1 millimeter, I think so. And that's good because that's a tiny space. And I think that fits pretty well. Probably scooch that wire a little bit to get it to fit in there better. Just take my plier. I'll give a tiny scooch. And if I can't make two fit comfortably, I like that. That's not too bad. I'm good with that. Then I would try to just get one in there, or a little bigger pink bead. You know, you play with it to make it fit. That's good, and I'm going to snap into that coil in the center there. I'll just come all the way back across. Since I don't need to coil in the center wire, it's already got a coil. I can just stretch all the way back across and then do another 5 wraps and get another couple of beads, and I can continue as far up this earring as I choose to. Or you didn't have to do this at all. It's all up to you. Alright, so I'm going to add a few more because I like it, and then I'll come back with my finished earrings. Alright, so I'm continuing to work up my earring here, and I really love how these are working out with these tiny little pink beads. When I come across here, I just want to make sure I'm really lined up so that it's nice and neat, that I snap into that coil. Come all the way back over here. Oop. Nice stretch across the back of the earring. And then make the same amount of wraps if you're using the same beads all the way up. So I think I did 5. But here's how it's looking in the back, and that's pretty as well. Alright, so I'm going to keep going. I'll do both earrings and meet you back here. Woo! It doesn't look like it's much, but it took quite a while to get all the way up here with these tiny little beads. These are pink crystal quartz, and I believe they're about 1 millimeter. Woo! And I love how they look. So I took my time and really worked them in there nicely, and I think that's beautiful. Alright, hopefully you guys are doing well with yours. Just take breaks. These are very small beads. It's an earring. It's a very easy earring design, just a very tedious one. And I don't mean tedious in a bad way. I just mean there's a lot of sewing, and these tiny beads take an effort. Especially if you have eyes like mine. Okay, keep working, you guys, and I will see you when my second earring is done. I'm just going to finish the coil all the way up to here. I think I really like that. Alright, see you in a minute. All right, you guys. Woo! That was quite a bit of work. They're beautiful. And I hope you enjoyed this wonderful project. And I hope you enjoy learning all of the ways that we can tie beads onto our beautiful earrings. All right, if you enjoyed this video or you were able to make one, please give me a thumbs up, leave me a comment, and certainly look me up on my Facebook business page at Perfectly Twisted Jewelry and let me see your beautiful earrings. Please tag me with what you make. I'd love to see. All right, you guys, I'll be back for the next one. We'll see you for the next one. Thanks again.
New York City.